Welcome to the Social Engineer Podcast, the Human Element Series. This is episode 226. I'm Chris Hednaghi, CEO and founder of Social Engineer LLC, as well as the Innocent Lives Foundation and the Institute for Social Engineering. And I've been doing this podcast since 2009, if you can believe that. Makes me sound really, really old. As always, this episode is sponsored by our company, Social Engineer. So if you are looking to keep your people safe from the vectors of vishing and phishing and other type of social engineering attacks, then you should go check out our new website, social-engineer.com. In addition to that, we have a whole new training path on there. If you're looking to make this your career and you'd like to enter the InfoSec field, especially focusing on humans and their vulnerability, understanding how they make decisions and how those decisions are exploited by the bad guys, go check out our training pages as well as our service pages at social-engineer.com. If you love the idea of social engineering and you want to talk about it, you should be in our Slack channel. We have over 1,500 people in there now every day talking about different things going on in the world about social engineering, pretexting, the psychology of it. Even a group gets together to practice elicitation and things like that. It's quite a nice group, family friendly. So if that sounds like you, come on in and join. We even had 10 people find employment because we have a job board on there. So you can find a link in the show notes. And if not, just hit me up on LinkedIn. I'd be more than happy to get you into that group. And I want to invite everyone to take a moment to go visit innocentlivesfoundation.org. If you're not familiar with our mission, the Innocent Lives was started 6 years ago. We work with law enforcement to help geolocate people who traffic children and who create child abuse material. And we've successfully worked up to almost 500 cases now. I'm really excited about that. Also excited to announce we have our very first gala that we're running out in LA at Burbank, a place called the Castaways, with none other than LeVar Burton as our host. I can't believe I'm even saying those words out loud. And we're coming out there 23rd of September. So if you want to join us, you want to help support the mission, you can go on to innocentlivesfoundation.org/gala, and you'll be able to get more information about that event out there. And also, if you love the music that this podcast is based on, it is none other than Clutch, the best rock and roll band on earth. So go give them some love. They're big fans of ILF, pro-rock.com, and you can go get their albums, or the best way to hear them is just go to a concert live. They are awesome. And last but not least, if you have an idea for an upcoming show, a guest you'd like us to have on, someone that you heard on another podcast you think would be great for this show, you can leave those comments, leave your ideas down in the comments there, especially if you're on YouTube watching this. You can give us a thumbs up and a like if you like the content that you hear, and that keeps us going and gets us into broader audiences. So we thank you for all the things that you've done so far to help the show. Now, let's get to our guest. I'm really excited about this because if you follow any of the interviews I've done, I was on Mark's podcast. It was a while ago. I think it was about a year ago. But let me tell you who we have today. Mark Raffan. He's an award-winning negotiation trainer, speaker, podcast host, well-known negotiation expert, and an entrepreneur. He coaches executives and teams in some of the largest companies on the planet and has been featured in Entrepreneur, Forbes, Thrive Global, Supply and Demand Chain Executive Magazine. And additionally, he's appeared on dozens of podcasts, include Making It Happen Mondays, The Brutal Truth About Sales, and The Insider's Guide to Finance, as well as his very own podcast, which I happen to be a guest on, that's all about the world of negotiations. Mark, it's awesome to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris. I really appreciate it, man. And by the way, can you do my intros at every event? But it made me sound really good, man. I like it.
Well, you make it easy because, you're really good at your job. So
yeah, I like it. That's awesome.
First of all, let me just say congratulations. Your book is getting released when?
Hopefully mid to late September.
Okay, that's great. So by the time that you're listening to this podcast, Mark's book is already out. So you need to go get it. What's the name of that book? We're going to talk about it, but what's the name of it? 9
Secrets to Win Deals and Influence Stakeholders. That's the main title. And the subtitle is A Field Guide to B2B Negotiations.
Love it. Okay. Let's talk about how you got to this point right now, because this is an interesting field. I mean, I don't know if anyone wakes up one day and goes, I'm going to become a negotiator. So how did you, what's the path that got you to being right here, right now?
Yeah, when people think of negotiation, I think the word comes with a lot of baggage, right? Like a lot of people immediately think of conflict. They think of tension. They think of people getting crazy and slamming down tables. And you probably have these visions in your head of Wolf of Wall Street type characters that are on the phone and all of a sudden can magically create a deal out of thin air. And we're like, how did he do that? Well, the truth is that, modern media and movies have been lying to you, as they do. about the discipline of negotiation. Yeah, I know. It looks more exciting than it actually is.
Really.
My career has been in sales and procurement for a really long time, specifically in the B2B space at an enterprise level. And about 6 years ago, I decided, look, I don't want to do this corporate thing. And so I started thinking about, what am I going to do? Where am I going to push my focus and my efforts? And I started writing a blog, and that blog started to get traction. And then I was complaining to some friends in a bar, as you do, saying, look, there's no great negotiation content out there that's audio or video. And I don't know what to do about it. Like, I'm a little bit upset about it. And as good friends do, they said, well, don't moan about it. Do something about it. And that night I had too much to drink and I bought too much podcast equipment. And then I went and started the Negotiations Ninja podcast. And today we're the top negotiation podcast in the world. And so since
what
that
year
time,
was that? That's one of the what year was that?
That was like 4 years ago, I guess.
Wow,
So,
that was a quick climb.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm lucky. There's not a lot of negotiation podcasts out there, man. Like, we're one of like 3 or 4. So it's amazing. And by the way, those 3 or 4 others that do shows as well are fantastic. And you should also listen to them. We're big on sort of hyping each other up. But yeah, just it's been an interesting ride, man. And so as I started that, I started delivering training on the side while I was doing my full-time job. And that led to full-time work as a trainer. Then that led to a full-time business. And now we offer negotiation training worldwide, all over the place. And it's been an amazing book and an amazing time. And I'm now releasing a book in September, which is great.
What a great origin story. I kind of love that, Like,
thanks, man. Yeah, it all started in a bar getting drunk.
Yeah, I know. This is the weird thing. Like, I have a lot of my greatest ideas that have formed over a glass of whiskey.
Oh, yeah.
I have a whole class that we teach now that formulated because I was sitting in a restaurant drinking a whiskey and I had this idea, pulled out a paper napkin, mind mapped it out, and now we teach a whole 5-day red teaming course based on that. I mean, just
ridiculous. Yeah, and whiskey gets you reflective real quick. I find that with whiskey and with wine.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. Red wine, I become a philosopher.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, very quick. Very quick.
Okay, so since you've been doing this for so long and you've been in different fields and you worked with different people, are there some like top mistakes that you often see that people make when they start to enter a negotiation?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the number one mistake, and you probably see this as well, is the gross lack of planning. The vast majority of people that I speak to don't even believe or think that negotiation is something that you can plan for. And I think that's the media thing that we can blame for this, right? We see all these movies where these deals just happen over the phone, just off the cuff, and people look like they're shooting for the hip. And that's a mistake. Don't do that. That's very silly, because when you do that, you don't plan for what you want to get out of the negotiation, or let's sub in a word, you don't plan for what you want to get out of the conversation, then the likelihood of you getting that is almost zero. So when you plan for things, shockingly, you become more successful.
Now, that's an interesting comment you just made. So should we be viewing a negotiation as a conversation?
I think if you're viewing negotiation as something that is conflict or tension oriented, you have a tendency to make it more conflict or tension oriented. Our actions go where our thoughts exist. So if you are thinking that it's a conversation, you become more conversational in the way that you have a negotiation. And when it becomes more conversational and when it becomes smoother, then it becomes a lot easier to have that quote unquote negotiation. So I caution people on, and I get why people think this, but I caution people thinking that there has to be conflict. There doesn't have to be conflict. Sometimes there is, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah. So I guess the idea of saying, like, in a negotiation, someone has to lose is really not a great way to enter it.
Yeah, and I'm also not a fan of the idea of win-win terminology either. I think philosophically there's something that we need to dwell on. Maybe this is the first controversial thing that I'll say on your show. I believe that the idea of win-win philosophy negotiations is flawed just simply by definition. Because if I was to ask anyone that was listening to the show, well, what does win-win negotiation mean to you? They would say, well, it's when both parties feel like they've gotten something of value. They feel like they've gotten a win out of the negotiation. And so then I say, wait, hang on. So I just have to make you feel like you've won? And you know this through your work. I can change your emotion throughout the conversation very easily. So if it just means that I get you to feel that way, that doesn't sound very right to me. And then other people say, well, no, Mark, it's not about feeling. It's about where we split the value evenly between both parties. And then I say, well, actually, that makes less sense to me than the feeling thing, because in the scope of grand B2B negotiations, knowing what the complete value of a deal is over the lifetime of that deal is almost impossible.
Yeah.
And even if we did know what it was and we decided that we were going to be splitting that deal evenly with each other, we would have to be 100% transparent with each other about what that value is for us. And then we would also have to trust each other enough for me to trust you not to take advantage of me, and for you to trust me not to take advantage of you, because I've revealed everything to you. And even if we were going to reveal everything to each other and trust each other enough, now we have to debate over, quote unquote, what is fair, right? So I think the definition kind of falls apart. So we're a big fan of goal-based negotiation, which is, look, we have objectives and we have goals that we set prior to going into the negotiation, and we have a range of acceptable outcomes that we have for those. If we hit those, we've been successful. If we don't hit those, we walk away. And those are the kinds of deals that we really try and push to make sure that, you know, we're actually achieving something. It's not incumbent upon me to make sure the deal is a quote unquote win for you. That's your job. You do that for you. I do that for me. In the end, we make a deal that makes sense.
I like that because when you were going through that other scenario, that if-then statement seems like it would just be so long and convoluted that there is no equating it. I've heard people say, which I always thought I didn't agree with either, like that a win-win is where everybody gets what they want. And I'm like, but that's impossible.
Right. You can't always get what you want.
Yeah, exactly. I can't get top dollar for my stuff and concede to giving something away, because now I'm not getting top dollar for my stuff. So,
right.
You're
going to have to concede something at some point in time in the negotiation. And if you concede something, you're not getting everything that you want. So it doesn't make sense that it's get everything that you want.
Yeah, I love it. That was a great rundown. So, strategy versus tactic. What do you think is more important for a good negotiator?
Strategy by far.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Strategy by far. Sun Tzu once said, "Tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat." Right, and that's true.
I love that,
because if you don't have good strategy, the tactics don't matter. Right? Like if I said, well, say this thing this way, and then you'll get what you want. My next question is, but what do you want?
Yeah.
So if you don't plan for what to get what you want, you don't have a strategy to be able to get there, you don't prepare accordingly, all of the tactics in the world won't help you. You'll sound great. You'll sound incredible. Your body language will be great. And all of that will be wonderful. You'll have great vocal inflection and all that kind of fun stuff. But if you don't plan for what you want to get, you won't be achieving the things that you want to get anyway. So it doesn't matter.
This is the common thread so far. I mean, we're only like 10 minutes in, and you've said prepare like 18 times. So that seems to be like the common thread for all of it, right?
Yeah. And look, I'm not saying that tactics are bad or that they're not important. They are important, obviously, right? If I show up more confidently, if I'm able to inflect in certain areas, if I'm able to ask great questions, if I'm able to lead you down a certain situation by use of my body language and social cues and elicitation techniques and all those kinds of things, great, wonderful. But I still have to have a plan, right? I've got to have a direction that I want to go to.
Yeah, and that fits so well with our industry too, because if you pop up to a building, you're about to break in, and you have no plan, you're most likely getting caught, or going to do something really dumb and hurt the client, right? So you better have a plan, and it better be pretty solid. And this really brings me to my next question. For us, that plan is based on OSINT, or open source intelligence, information. Yeah. How important is accessing information about your counterparty in a negotiation? How important does that become?
Yeah, data is your friend, right? And I think that a lot of people get hung up on that when I say data, because what they think I mean is third-party verified data that's going to, financial statements and all those kinds of things that are going to help you formulate good arguments in the negotiation. And that's important, don't get me wrong. And also, you need to realize that not just hard numerical, quantitative data is important. Qualitative, anecdotal data is also very important. So my ability to ask you great questions and get and extract information from you is going to build a better data set for me. It's going to help me make better decisions. It's going to drive a better negotiation. So yes, I want good, hardcore, third-party quantitative data. And also, I want good qualitative anecdotal data that I primarily ask you the questions of, because, and this is the same for your industry, the best information is the non-published, non-public information that I get from you. Because your financial statements may say, we have plans of growth for next year. But what they don't say is where those things are and what they're going to do in those places and how far along those plans are. All of that can be had as a result of the conversation.
Yeah. In our industry, we say information is the lifeblood of every exercise that we do, right? Without it, you really can't. I mean, you can't fish, you can't fish, you can't send a text message, you can't break into a place. Information is it. And then just like what you said, it's that observational OSINT that we do when you're watching a target or when you're walking up to a building. When we just had this situation where we're talking to the team about it, where we did all this stuff on Google Maps, looking at the location we were about to go breach. We scoped it all out. And when we got there, it looked way different. And we came up with a whole new, we had a plan, which was great, but we altered the plan based on what we saw in real life, not just on a street map view, right? So how often does that happen to you? Like you say, you have this plan, you go to do negotiation, everything that you thought was going to happen or how it was going to go, it just kind of went sideways. What do you do?
Right. Adjust. Yeah. Your ability to be flexible in that moment is really, really important. So to your point, the best planning in the world, like what was that Mike Tyson saying? Like you can have the best skills in the world until you get punched in the face or something to that effect. You're going to get punched in the face in negotiation. It's going to happen. Something's going to happen that you least expect in that circumstance. And when that happens, your ability to be flexible and adapt to the current situation has to change. Now, the goal doesn't change. Right? Like I still want to get to a certain place. My objective is still the same, but how I get to that goal has to change. So I've just got to adjust some of the planning and the preparation that I do to get to that goal.
Yeah, I love that. Because I think a lot of times what happens, and I see it in our industry, so I'm going to ask you if this happens in yours. People make the plan, really good at doing it, but then they get so super glued to it that when they get the punch in the face, it's almost like, oh no, what do I do? Because I was supposed to go left here. That was the direction I have to go. And now it's like, I just got punched to the left side of my face. I can't see there anymore. Right. So like, do you find that with new negotiators to be a problem when you're training or teaching?
Yeah, a lot of people get stuck in the trap of thinking of all of the questions that they're going to ask the counterparty, and they don't think about the questions that the counterparty is going to ask them. And so when those things come up, they get stuck in these situations where they get this seemingly left field question where they're like, whoa, how could I have seen that ever? Yeah. And so you say to them, well, you probably could have if you had just thought about it from the counterparty's perspective. What would they want to get out of this conversation? What were their things that they wanted? And it happens to a lot of people when they start their planning process. So my guidance is, look, yes, you got to think about what you want, but you also have to think about things from the counterparty's perspective too. And by the way, these are not things that you want them to want. These are things that they actually probably want. So you've got to think about it from their perspective and not lob yourself softballs in your planning process. Questions like, how long has your company been around? I mean, you're never going to get a softball like that. You're going to get like, how will you deal with this? How will you deal with that? When it hits the fan, how are you going to, all those really difficult questions that we don't want to face are going to come up. And the vast majority of quote unquote left field questions can be planned for ahead of time.
Yeah, that's an interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting point because we do the same thing. Where we try to talk to people that work with us about you can plan. People are predictable, so you kind of know if you've done this job once, hey, this is what happened last time. Probably going to be a similar path that happens this time. Yeah. So what are some of the skills that when you're starting off teaching someone, like someone comes to you and says, okay, look, I don't have any negotiation skills. This is what I want to do with my life. What are some of the besides planning, the skills that you want to instill in them?
Yeah, curiosity.
Oh,
I think as a behavioral characteristic, your ability to be curious is going to be the thing that gives you the most amount of success in negotiations. Because most people are trying to control negotiations using closed questions, because they think that by asking closed questions, they can direct the conversation a lot easier and control the conversation a lot easier. In fact, the opposite is true. Because when you do that, you're limiting the information that you have. You're not able to gather as much information. You're not able to make better decisions. So what we encourage people to do is to let go of this sort of myopic viewpoint of like, okay, I have to ask this, then this, then this. Yes, plan your questions. And also, when someone says something that's really interesting, say, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. What does that mean to you? Or how did you come across that? Or why did you decide to do it that way? Or help me to understand. And so those kinds of probing questions really help you to get to deeper and deeper and deeper levels of information, because we don't want to just understand that someone can do something for us. We want to understand what they're going to do it, how they're going to do it, why it's important to them. All of those motivational factors have to come in. So your ability to be curious is really what drives good behavioral sort of data for you.
I love that answer. I was not expecting that.
Interesting.
I love it because when I think about curiosity, I think curiosity is actually ego suspending. When I'm curious about something, like I'm saying to you, please teach me this, which means even if I think I know it, I have to be humble enough to say, no, can you teach me this, or can you tell me more about that? And that's a really interesting quality to have to
I was reading the other day about the Dunning-Kruger effect, where you have a level of competence that hits a certain point and you're you think you're amazing at I know how to do this thing. I know how to do this thing. And then you learn more and more about that thing. And then you go into the valley of despair and you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I know nothing. And then eventually your level of competence catches up to your confidence level, but you're always at that point of like, I don't know. And so that natural curiosity, I think, is really important, and recognizing that, you don't know. And if you don't, by the way, that's why we ask questions, because we don't know. So we have to ask questions.
I love the valley of despair.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
But it's such a great description. It's so true. I've had that happen in my life multiple times, where the more you learn about something, the more you realize I could always learn a lot more to be better.
Yeah. I've been recently doing a lot of studying on wine, and I'm trying to get more knowledgeable and make sure my palate is really good. And so I've been doing a lot of tastings and all the rest of it. And compared to the average person prior to doing this, I was pretty knowledgeable, but then I started gaining more intelligence about wine. And I was like, I know nothing. I know nothing about wine. And in that moment, you're like, oh, this is what they meant. We went to a wine tasting class here where I live. My wife and I, we went and did this evening, and same as you, I learned that night that my knowledge was subpar at best. But I thought I actually knew something. I can spell wine. That's all I know how to do right now. Okay, and even that is touch and go.
Depending on how much I drink beforehand, that's a little touchy. Exactly. Right? So I'm with you. Oh man, it's so that's really a great point. And then I love that, because I think for our industry, when you're bringing new people in, new energetic people, and they have some wins, sometimes they can get that way where they're like, I know how to do it all. Like, yes, and you don't need to like humiliate them, but it's nice to have that moment where you can start to see them realizing, oh boy.
Well, I mean, we've seen that right now with the change in sort of an economic shift, right? You've had, potentially years of doing very well. And we see this with a lot of salespeople that we work with. You haven't really had to try or improve yourself for a long time in order to get quote unquote wins or close deals. And now that the economy is shifting, everyone's like, oh, I can't, the economy, no, it didn't. That one thing that Jim Rohn once said, don't wish it was easier, wish you were better, right? It's going to get harder, which means you have to get better. And that's part of skill development.
I'm actually going to write that one down. That might be, you might have just said the title of this podcast.
Amazing.
Don't wish it was easier. Wish you were better. I love that. That's a great motto, by the way.
Right. I know. I'm a huge Jim Rohn fan. All credit to him.
Yeah, that's a really good motto, I think, for people to have, because it's I think it's easier to think like, wow, man, our economy's hard right now. Things are rough. I can't wait till we get back to where it was a couple of years ago. Right. What if it doesn't?
Right. Exactly. You don't know.
Right.
So that means you have to get better, because it might not get better.
Yeah. Yeah. And then if you're just waiting,
it might actually get worse.
And if you're waiting for it to return to what it was while you're sitting there waiting, that could be what's happening to your business, what's happening to your job, what's happening to everything. Right. Yeah. So let's talk about your book. So we got your path to your career, but what made you say, I got to write a book about this?
2 reasons. So number one, the selfish reason is I need to write a book to establish credibility in what I'm doing. And you know this, like once you write the book, you automatically become that quote unquote expert in the field. But the biggest reason was to help people, because I think what a lot of people get hung up on is like, oh, I'm going to write this book and it's going to make me famous and it's an amazing thing. But you can see the difference in the writing between someone who's writing something to be famous versus someone who's writing something to help people. And when you start with the intent of helping people, it changes the way that you write. Now, that's not to say that, I'm narcissistic enough to believe that this is going to absolutely revolutionize people's lives, but that was my purpose, right? Like I wanted to start out by saying, hey, I want to help you. Negotiation's not that complicated, but for whatever reason, because of the baggage that negotiation has, it comes with all of these preconceived ideas about how complicated they think it is. And it's not. So I wanted to lay out a formula, lay out a way, lay out a process to say, hey, just if you want to follow this approach, here's a well thought out, simple way to be able to negotiate. It's going to help you with everything that you do. But there's something that important that I really do at the end of the book that I think is really, really important. And I know that you do this as well, is you say, don't just read this. That would be very stupid, right? Like if you're just going to read one book on a thing, you're really limiting your knowledge. You're really limiting your perspective. And so we call out other authors to say, if you're going to read this, also read all of these other things that are really, really important to hone your negotiation skills, because I'm giving you a perspective on how I think you should negotiate. That's one perspective. You should be trying to read all of this other stuff. And by the way, some of that other stuff disagrees with the way that I approach negotiation. But that's really important because you want a broad perspective. So I really just want to help people find an easier way to negotiate. I
really love that message because, I really do think it's reality. Like I think all of us have probably read a book that chapter 9, you're sick of hearing how awesome the author thinks he is. Right. Yeah. You're like, I get it, man. You've told me that you told me that you're one level below God 90 times. And that kind of a book, I lose touch with it. I don't even finish them. Like it becomes something where I'm like, I'm not interested anymore. But then when you read a book, I think when you were saying that, my mind went automatically to Dr. Edmund because I got so involved in wanting to learn all about his work because he's a scientist that writes for people like me. And when I read his work, I don't feel like you're talking down to me. You're treating me like I'm dumb. I feel like you're talking to me, trying to help me understand this incredibly scientific stuff that you figured out. And that I love books like that. That makes me want to read more. Because
shout out Paul Ekman. Yeah. Thank you very much for the continued work that you do.
I love that guy.
That's all run by his daughter now, right?
No,
his foundation and
so his daughter, she's amazing too. So she got her PhD and she's doing this work on helping prisoners learn how to use empathy in their life, like rehabilitation through empathy. Some really fascinating things that she's involved in.
Amazing.
Yeah. Really interested there. And he did a project just, I think, last year with the Dalai Lama. They mapped out all human emotions. He put it online.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. He's 80 something years old. Every time I talk to him, he's still sharp as a tack. It's like, guy's unbelievable. Really.
Incredible.
Yeah, he's an incredible human being. But that goes back to it, is that his motive is helping people. I didn't know him, of course, when I first started reading his books. And then you get to know him and you're like, this is exactly why I loved your books, is because you're this type of person. Like, I got to meet you and know you, and now you're just like what I thought you would be by reading the book. It's not a show, so. Have you ever had David Matsumoto on your show? No, I've spoken to him a couple times through email, but I've never had him on. He's an interesting guy to chat to. Yeah, he was a student under Edmund. They worked together. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. He's continuing the work, right? Now that, Edmund's so up in years, but he set the stage for it, and I think that's what's important from what you're saying with your book is that, yeah, sure. All of us write things, we want to sell it. We want to get jobs because of it. I love going on other people's shows like yours and being interviewed about my book. Those things, of course, that stuff is fun. I'd be a liar to say, no, I hate all of that. It's not what but if the motive is just for that, if it's just for self-aggrandizing, spotlighting, then I think it comes across in the way that it's written. I agree. Mark, this has been awesome. I need to ask two questions as we conclude that we always ask. So first, of course, your book will be in the show notes. Awesome. So if you can get us a link for where you'll be selling it, is it on Amazon pre-order? It's going to be on Amazon shortly. In fact, I just had a conversation with my editor about it. Perfect. Because when it is, we'll put the link in the show notes. So when this comes out October, it's there and ready for everyone to go click and get that. If you haven't bought it yet, if you're listening, then you need to go do that. But are there any books that you've read? It doesn't have to be about negotiation. It can be anything, but books that you've read recently that you're like, I want everyone to know about this. This is like a great book. I am currently reading a book on Theodore Roosevelt that I think is really well, it's a series of books. There's 3 books and they're very long, but they are brilliant. I love reading biographies. I think like learning about great people of history could really teach us a lot about how we could be better at things. So I think that's really interesting. So what's the name of that book? I can't even remember. I think I'm on the 2nd book right now, but it's a trilogy of Theodore Roosevelt, and I will remember the author probably at 2 a.m. tonight. Okay. I'll just write this down, 3-part series about Theodore Roosevelt, and we'll find and I'm on the 2nd book right now, and it's super interesting. And the other book that I think is really interesting that a lot of people need to look at is a book called The Art of Learning by Josh Waitzkin, which is super impactful. And it changed the way that I think about learning. So this is the guy, that movie Searching for Bobby Fischer? This is the guy that's based on. So child chess prodigy that dropped out of chess and pursued other things. This is him. He wrote that book. And he wrote this book called The Art of Learning that teaches people his approach to learning. And it's really this immersive, throw yourself into it, block out everything else sort of idea to learning. And it's fascinating. It's the best book about negotiation that's not about negotiation. Because I think there's a lot of overlap. I love that. Yeah, it's brilliant. I haven't ever heard of it. So I love when we get book recommendations for things that like, I know I'm going to add that to my stack of books right here that I'm supposed to be reading. It's a great book. I highly recommend it. Now that guy he runs a bunch of jiu-jitsu studios, and he's a world-class jiu-jitsu athlete, which makes sense if you think about it, because chess and jiu-jitsu are both games of strategy and how you move. He's just applied chess to a physical realm. So it's really interesting. He sounds like a fascinating guy. He's super fascinating. In our life, we're usually getting to somewhere like we are. We've had mentors, or at least a mentor. Can you think of one person that you would say, without them, I would not be standing here right now? No question. My business coach, Marty Park, is by far the person that I go to when I have questions or just need someone to bounce an idea off of. And I'll say, what do you think of this? And then he'll just sit there and go, I'm not sure. What about this? And he'll ask me another question. I'll be like, I didn't consider that. And then I'll be in this moment of like, I should have called you earlier. I shouldn't have waited to ask this question. So Marty Park, great guy. Really appreciate his guidance. And when it comes to anything sort of spiritual or relationship based, I always go to my mom, because my mom's sort of been the guiding force spiritually in my life. So for other things in terms of health, I go to Uncle Google or Uncle YouTube, right? So I'll just go there. I'll ask, YouTube or Google, like, what about this? And then I get an answer. But if it's spiritual, I usually go to my mom. And then if it's business related, I go to my business coach. I love it. If people want to know more about you, if they want to follow you, find out what you're doing, what's the best place for them to connect with you or learn more?
Easiest place is LinkedIn. So go straight to LinkedIn, search my name, Mark Raffan, or go to the website negotiations.ninja, and you can find us there.
And really, check out his podcast, guys. It's a great, don't say, I'm not a part of negotiations. Just go check it out. If you're in InfoSec, that podcast is going to help you because it's got some great information on there. And it helps with elicitation, conversation, everything. So do it.
Well, thank you very much for having me on your show, man. This has been a great pleasure. It's always so great to have a conversation with you, but this especially was a great conversation. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for joining in. Next month, we'll be joined by YouTube sensation Ryan Macbeth. So come back next month. And until then, stay safe. See you.